Hello everyone and welcome to this Pharma IQ webinar, Navigating the Pharma Landscape and Competing in a Data-Driven World, which is brought to you in association with ZONTAL and Accenture. Today's webinar will explore how stakeholders' interests can push digital transformation and improve operational performance to create new market opportunities in the life science industry. Our presenters will share insights on how to maximize business benefits using the digitalization pyramid model and address the critical challenges of data standardization and global regulatory requirements in pharma. Before we start, however, I would like to quickly raise a couple of housekeeping points. As this is an interactive webinar, you can send your questions to our presenters via the Q&A box on the left-hand side of your screen. Please include your name along with your question, and we'll aim to answer these during the Q&A following the presentation. Please be sure to click the submit button, otherwise we will not receive your questions. There is also a link to a blog by Dennis Delacorte, Vice President of Business Development at ZONTAL, and also one of our which our presenters will be following today. He dives into some of the key challenges our presenters are touching upon. Finally, we will be having three polls during the presentation, so we do encourage you all to participate when they are shared with you. So with the housekeeping out the way, we'd like to hand you over to our presenters to begin today's webinar.
Also, welcome from my side. I'm Dennis Delacorte, Vice President of Business Development at ZONTAL, and I'll be the first speaker today. I'm excited for my two partners and colleagues, Chris Mayhew from Accenture and Bill Russo, to follow after my remarks. With this being outlined, let us jump straight into it. The crux of digitalization. We all are aware how digital applications are entering every part of our lives, and we see that being a big transformational progress also in the life science industry. Now, while digitalization is a word that we hear all the time and everywhere, we are always wondering, or oftentimes wondering, is it clearly communicated and understood by all the relevant stakeholders in our organizations? I sometimes feel when I go into town halls, either as a speaker or as an attendee, a little bit like this couple in the cartoon down here. There seems to be something important said that has something to do with either survival and growth of the company, relationship or whatever, but it is not necessarily clearly communicated or understood. And so today we really want to focus on aligning a global enterprise vision that can help managers to clearly communicate the business benefits long-term and short-term for the core stakeholders in their company, and also emphasize the need of going through the digital transformation process together with a strong partner and an enabling platform. Before we jump into this, I have a short poll question for you. And I would like to know if you have ever felt like the couple on this slide in either a town hall meeting or a similar interaction with either your management or someone in your organization. So let's see if the technology works. The question should be open now. I'll give you about 20 seconds to give a response there. And just try to indicate, have you ever felt like misunderstood or being misunderstood when digitalization was addressed? All right, then let us keep going and see what the results of this are. Okay, so about 70% of the people would agree that a situation like this is common. About a third of you say no, digitalization is clearly understood. This is great. So I hope this third is not going to jump off the call now. There's still going to be some good content for you. But especially for the 70% that say communication can be a challenge, let me provide you with some background that can help. The first thing I would like to show you is this definition of digitalization as it is given by Gartner, where they say that digitalization is the use of a digital technology to change a business model and to provide new revenue and value-producing opportunities. It's actually a process of moving to a digital business. So there are 4 key points in this definition I'd like to point out. The first is that digitalization is really about changing a business model. It means, for example, for a pharma company to stop focusing on making and selling pills, and instead starting to explore the opportunities to interacting directly with the end customer, for example, through a mobile app, and giving them the opportunity to interact with them and giving them very targeted and personalized access to specific offerings that they have, which creates new revenue streams and new opportunities. So the idea that I have to rethink my old business models and leverage current technologies so that I can be competitive in the future and open new revenue streams is really all that digitalization is about. So in principle, a great idea, right? We enhance our business model, we create new revenue, we create new opportunities. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that this is not a voluntary action. Digitalization is something that can be considered an external pressure and force as exhibited on the life science industry. There have been recent reports by McKinsey & Co. that suggest that the masters of digitalization will completely dominate over the companies that lag behind, with double-digit billion numbers of numbers of revenue differences over the next 5 years. So the cost of not doing digitalization right is projected to be huge in the future. So while it sounds like a nice opportunity, it's also especially crucial for the long-term survival of a company. Here's an example that highlights this. About 2 years ago, the DeepMind company, a subsidiary of Google that is best known, for example, for AlphaFold and AlphaZero, these artificial intelligences that are dominating grandmasters in classical board games, has started to go away and mature from solving games into solving science. And they have brought out a first fully data-driven protein folding model. And protein folding is a very essential problem for pharma companies, because if you have a fully atomistic representation of a protein, you can start designing drugs for that. And a lot of the proteins inside of our body are not accessible for typical experiments, and so they're currently not even available for investigation. Recently, of course, the COVID-19 crisis has driven a lot of research around corona and corona-related proteins, and the ability to quickly turn around and tell you or tell a researcher what the structure of a corona-related protein is really crucial to develop a vaccine against it. And using an approach like DeepMind, the research team that I'm heading has developed now a degenerate model of their AlphaFold pipeline, and we're able now to fold proteins, as you see in the slide, for pretty good resolution, which we did for some of the COVID-19 targets. But it is something where we have to say, within academia, we lag at least 2 years behind what Google has presented in 2018. And industry in general is even further behind. And so when you think about a company like Google being able to all of a sudden increase the number of potential drug targets by X-fold just by developing such a data-driven approach, that is consists in a big threat for the industry. And downstream, if pharma doesn't learn how to leverage their core assets, the data that they have produced over the last 100 years in a meaningful way, it will be very hard to compete with companies that have all of the science around but lack the data to make the great leaps. But over time, it will really be the question of who is able to bring the science and the data together to that will define who is going to be the masters of digitalization and the ones that drive the big revenue in the future. Okay, so that being said, it's kind of clear that digitalization solves a long-term problem in terms of company stability, survival, and also bringing the best benefits to the end customers. But what I want to argue with for the rest of my presentation is that it also solves a lot of short-term problems, the type of problems that make the coming to life of a digital strategy a big challenge in today's enterprises. In German, we have the saying that goes, you cannot see the forest because all the trees are in the way. And that is really what's happening with digitalization. We are all so distracted by the day-to-day business challenges that it is often very hard to see how this new digital transformation project, this IT flagship project, whatever, has any tangible impacts on me in my daily life. And therefore, I'm not that interested. I'm not going through the change process. I'm not developing the attitude that is necessary for my enterprise to really transform completely. And so I think as managers, it's our responsibility to remove the obscurity from our stakeholders' vision and align clearly with them on what benefits digitalization can bring to them. And in order to do this, I would like to introduce the model of a digitalization pyramid, which I consider a model that helps us understand where different people inside of our organization are and why it is hard for them to see the end goal of a data-driven business being in reach. So the idea is that we have this three-dimensional pyramid where everyone in the company is sort of at the bottom and kind of looks up and sees, oh, high management wants us to be data-driven. How do I get there while I'm having all of these daily challenges that I need to focus on? So what I want to do with you is to look at 4 different stakeholder groups, look at their daily challenges and see how a foundational digitalization approach can solve these, and by solving these, help all of these groups ascend together towards this pinnacle of a data-driven business. For this, I want to first look at quality and compliance managers. With rapidly changing technology, it becomes more and more important that we store data fully compliant for FDA and other regulatory authorities. Now, in the past, paper was a good thing. It's no longer good. Back in the day, PDFs were invented. They seemed good for a while. They're no longer good enough. At this point, everyone wants data that is reintegratable, data that can be read in 15 years, data that will be meaningful even after my applications are shut down. We need to find solutions to store data compliantly long-term. The solution to a problem like this is what we coin a digital integration hub with preservation opportunities. It is a technological platform that enables the complete and compliant archiving and preservation of digital information. If you put such a platform in place, then a quality and compliance manager knows exactly where to store information and from where to retrieve it. Once this platform is in place, though, typically the next question that arises is, now that I have the data, what else can I learn about the data? Can I get the full data genealogy? Can I drill down into an individual release batch? And those opportunities are there if you learn how to transform data into information. And the process of transforming data into information comes by integrating data through meaningful contextual descriptive information. And the digital integration hub is really built for those purposes of harmonizing and standardizing data, descriptive data, context, and processes so that individual data sets can be put into relationship with others. Having that in place will really start to open up the eyes for the real benefits of digital transformation. And for a quality compliance manager, what could be nicer than a completely automatized audit report generation? And something like that can become possible through a digital integration hub. If you look at the regulatory manager, those are the people that have to deal with a lot of different sources of data and have to integrate between them, which oftentimes means a lot of manual work, transcribing emails, transcribing word processing documents, document management systems, and getting information passed to and fro. That's very hard to harmonize and standardize if you're application-centric. But if you have a setup where your data is at the center, it is possible to leverage abilities of a data integration hub to streamline all of this complicated manual work and automatize it. And by leveraging contextual metadata, you can really set yourself up to be prepared to automatically create submission documents, which is something that will downstream really revolutionize this part of the industry, as we're losing so much time in the tedious process of creating documents that could really, with current technology, be automatized. A third group are collaboration managers, people that want to get their contract research and manufacturing organizations to operate according to specific layouts and setups. And in order to transfer a method or a descriptive experiment over, it's currently very tedious. You have to send people, you have to do training. It's very difficult. But with a data integration hub, with a method sharing functionality, are able to use a standardized and harmonized description of a process and transfer it over in an unmistakably understandable way. And that allows you to really ensure highest quality of interaction with these contractual organizations, and also allows you to automatically ensure that the data that comes back fulfills all of the internal quality requirements that you have. And of course, on top of this, you can then build nice dashboards that allow you to really score the performance of such CROs and CMOs. Finally, when we think about the laboratory, we always hear the term fair data. In a laboratory, all data has to be fair, which means it has to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. A data integration hub is the technology that enables fair data. It enables you to make your data at all times findable and accessible by putting it into a place that everyone has the access and the opportunity to put data into and get data out from. But by making the data, again, the core asset of the company, it also allows you to integrate the data with descriptive information that makes it really process-centric. And in that moment where you do this, you will be able to actually reuse data from the past for future opportunities. And when we think about all of the AI and machine learning opportunities that are on the horizon, we do not want to have our data scientists spend 80% of their time cleaning up all data sets, or have our scientists regenerate data that we theoretically had in store. We want to be able to preserve and harmonize our data so it is ready when you need it to fuel your digital transformation. So in an overview, what we can see is that there are 4 different groups, which are all sort of at the bottom at this point, having their individual problems. But if a global strategy is set up that says by introducing a digital integration hub as an enabling platform, we can raise every one of these stakeholders to higher and higher productivity. And while they go to higher and higher productivity, what we're doing is really laying the foundation of a data-driven business, because we start to have this company wealth of digital assets that can be leveraged. Of course, the question is now, does this permit actually apply to you, or I'm just telling you stuff? So here's another short poll for you. Please indicate if this resonates with you and if you find yourself on the pyramid. Going to wait here for another 5 seconds. Okay, let's have a look at the results. Oh, that's a very clear yes, 100%. I'm glad that you came. Okay, cool. Now, of course, now is the question, if this pyramid is relevant, how do we climb it? I think we need 3 things to climb it. We need a global vision, we need strategic change management, and we need an enabling platform. We at ZONTAL offer the first enterprise-class digital integration platform that's currently being used to successfully drive digitalization at top pharma companies. I'm excited to have Bill talk to you more about how you can learn more about us. And then our next speaker will be Chris from Accenture, who represents a company that does strategic consulting for Fortune 500 companies from all industries, and has a lot of experience with how you make digitalization a reality. So with this, thank you for your attention and pass you over to Chris.
Many thanks, Dennis. Hope you can all see the slides. So yes, thanks. I'm Chris Mayhew from Accenture. Just looking to quickly just give you an overview of how you might make the digitally enabled lab a reality. And this is quite exciting because some things are very much kind of leading edge, but some of these technologies now, it's particular at the moment in the lab, and some of these technologies can be applied to the lab from outside the industry. So actually some of these things we'll talk about today to move on to enable your digital lab are actually available, and now it's just a case of bringing them together with a strategy. So what are the drivers and the demand for digitally transforming a lab? So moving on from what Dennis has introduced and some of the challenges, one of the key things is new science, and this is particularly prevalent in today's current life science challenges are all probably aware of, in that there's new science where traditionally a drug product might have been used, but now those products are now much more complicated and sophisticated, and where it might have just been an oral dose or along those lines, it now can be actually a digital component, or even in some therapeutics and new therapeutics, it could actually be a totally digital application. So a lot of these challenges are challenges of the industry, causing or expecting the business to innovate rapidly. And then with that, with all of those extra bits of data to provide data insights and enable the organizations and across life sciences and laboratories to collaborate more broadly, whether it be early research, development, through to kind of preclinical, and then through into clinical. So just bringing tighter collaboration across the organizations. But on top of that, you've got additional data complexity. Dennis mentioned about some of the old schooling quotes from the data volumes, which is previously paper. Now that is now digital data, and more so lab equipment is better connected, generating more data faster. There's automation and robotics that will generate data and repeat experiments faster, and creating a greater burden often on scientists. And traditionally, scientists have been often at the brunt of a lot of these changes, and they've actually been the people that have kind of been joining some of the processes together that haven't been fully digitized. So they've been copying the files, and I'm sure there's a few people on the call today that have experienced that at the on the shop floor. So hopefully, as things get more and more digital, they can be better connected and remove that burden on the scientists and lab analysts, so they can actually do the science and not be burdened by this. So, and then once you've got those things better connected, then obviously you can exploit some of those technologies, the augmented realities, the extended realities that we're now starting to become more commonplace, and building upon that extra data that's being captured from the equipment, to then build upon that with machine learning and AI to produce those extra insights, and then you can actually scale up at that kind of factory level. So just a bit of industry background here. Accenture a year or so ago asked about a number of cross-section of life science leaders, where they are in their digital transformation across all of the sections, not so much in clinical, but across the other industry sections here, to provide some insight into where they thought they were on their own digital lab initiatives. So lots of people have invested with the digital lab, and lots of people you'll be familiar with digital lab transformation projects, and lots of people will probably have digital lab transformation projects. But as you can see on the right here, there's actually 40% of people that haven't actually started or hadn't started at the time of this survey. And an equal percentage have actually got to that pilot stage. So they've made a commitment. They know they want to go in this digitization. And this is a familiar story where people have actually got to that pilot, and they may have evaluated it, and they might not want to adopt it, or they might want to take it further, but not actually taking it through to that end kind of scaling up and into production, where they can actually leverage the value from that. So there's lots of challenges within this, and some people have been adopting this early on, and now maybe jumped in too soon, or maybe the technology wasn't quite right, so they've now got to reevaluate and choose a value. But there's very few people here have actually got have kind of extended their technology solution and kind of built it in with a kind of partner ecosystem to kind of develop that and continually scale to get the value. But it just gives you a bit of insight, and hopefully it kind of resonates with people here. So looking at some of the architecture, and there's a couple of the paradigms we'd like to pull out, and much of this is kind of building on what Dennis was discussing about digitalization and talking about data strategies and platforms, and Dennis actually mentioned the fair data standards, to actually enable those processes. Once you've actually captured that data and maybe applied an ontology to get that data together, you can then start building up a data strategy, which is a great foundation to then build upon to enable you to transform your lab. And then building upon that, it's not just a platform as such, but more of a platform thinking to try and break down those typical silos we've all seen with ELNs and LIMS and lots of other systems that have been very much great at what they do, but on their own. And actually, we need to kind of flatten those out to think platform, if you like, so that those applications or the data that and the functions within those platforms can actually speak to each other. And we mentioned about it with capturing data. We need to link that digital thread between humans and instruments and then to insights. So we need to capture all that data digitally right from the beginning, and then allow that digital thread to be built up across the organization, spanning the different areas within early science through to manufacturing, so that we can actually build insights across the organization. And then we can build upon the things that we talked about, AI, machine learning, and then extended reality to enable to really exploit those. So again, reiterating that point, there are clear stages within the transformation, but really it comes down to the foundational, doing the basics brilliantly, which is a key. If you take anything away, this is a good start. Simplify your application landscape, try and think platform, start to get your data, know where your kind of key points of truth are for your data, try and capture it all digitally, because once it's digital, then you have the ability to transform it a lot easier than a ton of paper, as traditionally seen. And then look at ways to build on that. Look at data-driven ways of using that digitized data and then transforming it, and then going on to the future to be aspirational. How are you really going to use that data to transform your business? So some of the strategies here and good things to think about actually within the strategies of building it, making this lab a reality, is to kind of set your goal, define your digital lab, chart your progress, make yourself aware across your organization. It's not going to work if you're just focused in one area. You need to consult with and work across the areas of your business to actually build up those ideas. Where are we going? What are we going to do? What's most important? What gives us the most value? And it doesn't have to be a big bang. You can, once you've got the vision, you can actually build up incrementally those projects that will allow you to kind of pick winners and scale. Because you can actually take one and develop it. It doesn't have to be perfect first off, but you need to have the goal and the North Star of where you're heading. And then you can actually use areas where you can try this, but again, building with key partners to actually help you along that journey, to influence you, to guide you, and to get to where you want to go to actually start to achieve your North Star. And your North Star is not going to be something you're going to achieve in the first year. It may be a 5-year goal you want to set to set out your North Star. Okay, so building upon that. We use a kind of a process, industry process, to help us support clients in this aim. So defining a North Star, which is then going to help you when you actually have your projects and your ideas and you merge those, and some of those will be great, but you can't do them now. Some of those will be put on the backlog, but enable you to build up that pipeline of things you want to do, and then try and pick them off one by one where they achieve value. But you have to have that end goal to actually apply those projects to then start making the changes. And don't be afraid of deviating along to your goal, because there will be challenges along the way. But it needs to be an iteration and not a big bang to help you get there. So that was a very quick introduction and an overview of the Digital Lab, but hopefully that resonated. If you'd like to know more, please get in touch or contact us or see us online. Thank you. And now over to Bill, who's actually going to provide some customer engagements and some overviews and next steps. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Chris. So as we start to move towards the end of the presentation, we thought we would highlight how customers are starting to use the strategies that Chris outlined with the platform that Dennis mentioned to ensure that they're becoming the master of digitalization and not suffer the consequences of the laggards of the industry. So we'll talk a little bit about some use cases, then summarize the presentation, and then we'll talk about potential next steps we can take with your organization. So before we start with that, we thought we would ask, as you look at digital transformation and the projects you have on your roadmap, are your organizations look at embarking on a project either this year or next? I'll wait another few moments to get the answers. Okay, great. So if we look at the poll result, it sounds like we're remaining in an area of high interest for the organization. So about 91% of you are looking to embark on a digital transformation project. So moving towards customers, many of our customers are actually starting to take advantage of the value of going to a data-driven organization across all the perspectives that Dennis had mentioned, from the digital laboratory through quality and compliance and regulatory. And it all starts with the foundation of a solid data strategy and then an enterprise data platform that can provide a central point of aggregation of the data, conversion of that data into a harmonized format, and then allowing technologies to leverage that data for advanced analytics and AI. So going down the chart, you can see that many of our customers are using it across their entire organization to create a standard for their AI platforms to gain new insights on all the information that they're generating in their lab. Some are using them as a means of centralizing the data to ensure quality and compliance across their organization, interconnect and simplify the landscape of interconnected applications across their organization, provide collaboration and automated reporting to their customers, and provide a foundation to generate automated regulatory reports to simplify the approval of drug compounds. So it's time to rethink your data strategy. As Dennis outlined earlier, in order to realize the full potential of the data that you generate, it's time to rethink your data strategy. As Dennis mentioned, it takes three things to be successful: a global vision, a strategic data management strategy, and enabling platform. I would add one more thing: the right partner. With the right partner or partners, you'll be able to develop the right digital strategy, enact and enable the correct digital platforms that will empower your science through the digital transformation. Both Accenture and ZONTAL have been doing this for our customers for over the past 20 years. With that, I'd like to offer next steps. If you're interested in personalizing this session and having a workshop for your team, please contact one of us and we'll work together to develop a strategy and a session that will bring your organization or a strategy to your organization to move into the digital world. And with that, Emily, I think we're able to open up the session to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you also to Dennis and Chris for your presentation. Some great insights shared throughout. Thank you to everyone for sending in their questions. Please do keep them coming, and our presenters will try to answer as many as possible within the next 15 minutes. So, Chris, we'll start with the first question. Our attendees want to know, what do you see as the biggest challenge within your digital transformation?
Okay, the biggest challenge in digital transformation. So I think it's probably not looking at the technology first. Probably to start and work across the organization, bring people across the organization, key thought leaders in the organization, to actually look at what might be the focus, where you want to get to. And then maybe start doing an assessment right off before actually looking at changing a key technology. So don't start with the technology. Think wider than that, but start to bring in leaders from across the organization to actually begin that transformation, to get the right people involved. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Dennis, could you also maybe add to the question based on your digital pyramid model? We may have lost Dennis there, so we're going to move on to the next question quickly.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I wasn't exactly sure which one you were referring to.
Sorry, yes, no, of course. What do you see as the biggest challenge within your digital transformation?
Oh, so what we have seen is typically that there are two things that have to come together. You have to have a very clearly aligned core group inside of the customer that we're working with. So if you bring 3 or 4 different organizations together and they can see how putting a joint proposal into place that will benefit all of them, that typically gets the attention and support of the executive management in order to fund these activities. So that's always been the first important step, to bring the right people together and align them well. And once they are found and have been able to formulate an additional idea, it is always very important to bring someone in that has done this successfully in the past. So bring someone in that has run digital transformation at a different company before and knows about the typical energy barriers that are in the way, which are oftentimes really translate well between the different industries. And so we can learn a lot from what happened within banks, for example, that went through digital transformation extremely efficiently over the last 10 years. And we can see similar things in other business areas as well. And we learn from those people together. And so by understanding that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can build or stand on the shoulders of the giants from the past, you can really quickly identify what steps you should take as the organization. So bringing the people together, getting the outside help that you need to formulate the strategy, and then finding the technology that really supports this, that I think can overcome the challenges, which typically are confusion, right? That's the biggest challenge. People have so much to do and they learn about something new and they just don't know how to handle it. But following such an approach typically leads to a successful project outcome.
Thank you so much. So moving on to the next question, we have one from Lewis in our audience. Many of the academic scientists I work with shy away from software or data services, which require expensive licenses, preferring a share way approach on open platforms. How can the industry provide this to our university and research establishments while making the revenue they need from revenue generating end of the pharma sector? Quite a long question there.
Wow, that's a very interesting question. I'm personally in this situation where I'm a professor at a university in the US and doing research in the biomedical area, and then working at the same time also on enabling businesses to leverage digital transformation as good as possible. So I think what I have seen is that universities are very eager to develop things themselves. We actually published a paper beginning of this year on a proof of concept with one of the largest library universities in the US that used the ZONTAL space system in order to replace their document management for multiple terabytes of data. And what we have seen there is that the interest of universities in leveraging off-the-shelf software is great, but as soon as they have it, they like to modify it. And that actually creates great win-win situations that can make it possible for industry partners to team up with universities. If they can, because we are always interested, of course, to innovate and build new solutions within industry, but we don't necessarily always have the manpower or the necessary customers to explore new high-risk opportunities. Working together with universities can be a great opportunity. And so we have definitely been open for communications with scientists in the past to make licenses that are typically priced at a different level for industry, more affordable for researchers, and with the idea that we can then create some mutual win-win situation where we either publish something together or where we develop additional business intelligence tools that leverage the information. So I think there are totally paths forward to address this. And if this is of interest, I'd be happy to discuss also as a follow-up.
Amazing. Thank you, Dennis. Chris, do you have anything to add to the question?
No, I think that was a great answer, Dennis.
Bill, do you have anything to add there?
I think Dennis answered that well.
Fabulous. So Bill, we actually have a question for you. How can a data integration hub improve a typical pharma company's financial performance?
Did you say that question was geared towards me, Emily?
Yes, if possible.
Sure. There are many ways that you can look at how we can help with a financial performance. First, there's the direct cost savings, and then the indirect benefits of applying AI technology. So in the direct cost savings, many companies look to place applications within their organization to allow scientists to automate their laboratory. Each of these applications require custom interfaces to data sources and other applications to create an integrated digital laboratory. When that occurs, each interface has a direct cost to it. So by putting in place a digital integration hub, you directly simplify the application landscape and allow each system to connect to the integration hub and utilize the vendor neutral file format for loading the data. So the support cost of implementing a new solution goes down. The long-term costs of implementing point integrations between applications and instruments are resolved. The second direct cost saving is when companies look to migrate from one platform to another, either change their notebook, change their LIMS, change their document management system. And that project of converting from a legacy vendor to a new vendor always has an additional project associated with it, which is a data migration strategy project. So how much does it cost to move the legacy data from the old system to the new system? Is that even possible? So that cost can be the same or more than implementing the new solution and become cost prohibitive to adopt new technologies. Or in many cases, customers wind up implementing a new solution and then leave the legacy solution up so that people can access that legacy data to allow them to see what's been done in the past alongside with the new data. And then many customers look to implement a data lake or AI technology at the end of the data collection process. And that extraction, load, and transforming data takes a long time and and costs a significant amount of money. So by doing this as part of the process of capturing the data, the transformation, and the normalization of metadata, you greatly reduce the time and the overall costs of realizing the benefits of becoming a data-driven organization. Now, once the data is in there, the ability to connect those systems into machine learning and AI allow companies to make better decisions, to promote candidates faster, or decide to move on from candidates in a faster time frame. Dennis, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that was a good answer. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Another attendee wants to know, how do you ensure that your current digital transformation investments will continue to pay back, considering that technology lifecycle is getting shorter or changing? Dennis, I'll direct this question to yourself.
Sure. That's a very interesting question. When we consider the technology life cycle and say it's shorter and shorter, we have to think about what is actually getting shorter. Is it technology in sense of best practices and standards, or is it specific applications? I think it's the second. So when we look at the normal IT landscape of a pharma company, for example, we see that they have 20, 25 different ELN systems, LIMS systems, document management systems, whatever. And all of those are living in a sort of silo world. When they are being bought, they're bought because they bring some fancy feature that is important to a certain number of people in the company. But as technology changes and other systems come around, this once great utility becomes now a legacy burden that you have to carry along. So it's kind of hard to say, well, what should I do if I always get one application exchanged with another? So the real idea is that we learn from the technological advances to get ourselves out of this application hold and start to think data-centric. And data centricity means that I no longer say that the technology is at the center of my company, and if I would want to calculate the value of my company, I list up all the cool systems I have. Instead, I assess my own value by how good my data will be able to survive the replacement of a current application. And if I start thinking in this data-centric way, I'm completely resilient to technology changes because my data will just pass from one generation of technology to the next and always stay and remain the main company asset, as it is just going to be leveraged in more effective ways by the new application that comes in. And that's a huge mind shift that was probably developed over the last 4 to 5 years, I'd say, and is slowly starting to penetrate the market. And this technology change will really be a one-time investment to set it up, but then down the road will not cause you all these headaches of migration projects from the past. And so I think in this case, a technological advancement is going to make you really it makes it unnecessary to worry so much about applications that change quickly as you start to leverage data independent of the application. So I think we are now at the point where this is no longer going to be a big concern.
Thank you so much. A very detailed answer there. Chris, is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think Dennis answered that nicely.
So the next question will actually still move on to you, Chris. Companies that start applying digital transformation but eventually give up, what are the main reasons, and do you have any good practices to avoid this?
Okay, so I'm not sure about people giving up, but I think some people, like was mentioned earlier in the presentation, that some people do get into that. They start with pilots. They might want to go further, but they kind of get caught up in pilot hell and not knowing the next process to actually start realizing that and at scale. So I think that's one thing. And again, I alluded to a little bit of that, which was around the process. So if you've actually got that process there to actually validate those ideas and projects as they come through as ideas, and then as they go through as projects, then start having that process, and maybe that's a team or a partner to actually take that from idea into production. But it does go back to having the right people involved as well, the right stakeholders, to actually validate the project and know what those stages are. Maybe have your own pilot lab within, and as a process to take from that initial iteration and idea, and then build up a pilot lab, and then have that so that people can actually assess that without internally, so they can get the training and build it out before it actually starts changing their processes. They might work day to day, which obviously everyone's focused on their day-to-day work, and they can't take that new process. But if you actually give them a pilot lab where they can actually start to evaluate it when they're not in quite so much time pressure, then they can start to evaluate it practically and be familiar with it. So when it does go live, they're actually part of that process. So they're kind of bought into it, and they've submitted their feedback as part of those iterations before going live, if you like, into production. Does that help?
Fabulous. Yes, very good. A very nice detailed answer there. Thank you. So just in time for another question. We have a couple more minutes. So Dennis, this one's for you because digital transformation is a big topic. So one of our attendees want to know where should you start? What are CIOs investing in? Their top three, and what are their top three priorities for HLSCs in 2020 and 2022?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So it always depends a bit on the company that you're talking about. When we think about a standard pharma company, there are a few business pressures that you cannot ignore. For example, compliance is a big topic. And I think the number is about $2 trillion that are spent every year alone in the US on somehow surviving all the compliance traps that FDA has put into place. So there's a huge risk associated with falling out of compliance, and therefore companies are very willing to make necessary upgrades. So that is definitely an area that I would always want to involve in a digitalization process, because getting data into the current state of the art in a standardized and harmonized data format where it's long-term stable, where it can be used to prove the validity of your current submissions, that's crucial. That's definitely a stakeholder group you should involve, though I would like to say that those are typically the best funded ones. The second group that is really important to involve is regulatory. When you are at the end of your drug discovery pipeline, you want to go through the submission process, every day means a lot of money to you. If you have a new blockbuster drug, you just don't want to get it a week later on the market. You want to get it as soon as possible. And so being able to leverage AI in order to speed up the submission process, that's going to be a huge value driver for CIOs. And so being able to involve those stakeholders in their information systems and get them up to speed for the new technology, that's also going to be crucial. And then if you think about the laboratories and how much data is currently being reproduced and regenerated because you just cannot access the old one anymore, that is also a huge waste of money associated with the overhead of all of these old legacy information systems that are sitting around. So by putting in some of the lab people as well into the conversation, you can typically find some very easy wins that allow you to justify the cost of an IT project with very hard numbers with a very short return of investment phase.
Thank you so much. Bill, do you have anything to add to Dennis's comments there at all?
I think Dennis was right on. I think that was a good answer.
Fabulous. So we'll move swiftly on to the next question. This will be our last question of the webinar. Bill and Dennis, if you could answer this in unison would be great. How will new labs without ELN empower new Genesis software, and is it compliant with FDA?
Could you repeat the question?
No problem. So how will new labs without ELN empower new Genesis software, and is it compliant with FDA?
So to answer the FDA question, yes, the ZONTAL space platform is fully compliant with 21 CFR Part 11 compliance and digital signature requirements. With regards to the other question, every laboratory has a series of applications that they use to generate data analyze the data, and then report on the data. Solutions like ELNs, Empower, and New Genesis provide an aggregation layer of that data with context related to either the experiment that's being executed, the method that's being executed, or as a generalized data store. Without that software in place, what we would do is connect to these other applications and aggregate the data from those sources, enrich the metadata by connecting the system to a data model, and converting that data, storing the raw data file for a complete system of record, but then converting that file over into a vendor-neutral format that would allow other applications to utilize that data for further data reduction and analysis. Dennis, do you have anything to add to that?
No, if I get the question right, the question is, will the future lab still have software like this around? And I think it still is going to be there. You're still going to have systems in place that talk to your lab instruments. What you will just have is a more integrated workflow where data will be more vendor agnostic. So you won't be locked as much into certain data formats that come with an application, but rather your files are going to be exchanged quite interactively and become right away reusable by a larger number of systems. So that goes hand in hand with the entire idea of Internet of Things and Internet of Lab things. So otherwise, Bill's answer was great.
Great, thank you. And with that, we've come to the end of today's presentation. Thank you to Dennis and Bill from ZONTAL and Chris from Accenture for a brilliant and insightful presentation. Some great advice and information shared throughout. This session will be available on demand very soon, so please do share it with any of your colleagues who are unable to join us today. Please feel free to also reach out to us directly with any questions that you may have. Thank you again to all of our presenters and to all of you who have attended today. That concludes today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.